I say Neil Young?
You just did, because I was talking about
Timmy, not Young. Yeah, what are you going to do about it, eh? How we all doing? Yeah? Yeah, good. You're the hardcore supporters of the arts right here. Right here in this room. How many of you were here back in July?
You were.
Yeah. Oh, I think I recognize you. No, we actually pointed to you, something, yeah. You were very cute. It was very. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to waste any time because we have 6 incredible stories to tell here tonight, and it's been a real honor, and I mean that. I don't use that word too frequently, but be able to spend time with people and have them become vulnerable in front of you to share their stories, regardless of the topic. You know, you're putting yourself out there, and it can be really, really difficult. Yeah, anybody who's done it before, you know of what I speak. And it's not so much the, like being first one, you know, she's done quite a bit of speaking in the corporate world, and she's been up here one time before, but just having eyes upon you, listening. Yeah, so we've had a very busy season here at the RFA Lakeside Theater. We have put on the musical Chicago.
Yes.
Great show. We put on the Mountain Home Companion. Yeah, we've had some concerts. We had a drama camp. We're going to have another drama camp coming up. We have 2 of these. Yeah, the Diva show last week. Yeah. The last night, I mean, it just builds, and the energy is just so intense. It's so much fun. And then we have the Mousetrap coming on the 15th, 16th, and 17th. A murder whodunit. Do you want to know who done it? I'll tell you right here.
No.
All right. As a matter of fact, we have 2 of the storytellers who are also in the Mousetrap.
And you.
And moi, yeah. And we had to learn French to be able to do it, which was very exciting. So if it's worth anything, come and watch people try and speak French in a Maine accent. Yeah. All right, so in no particular order, I'm going to switch it up. They think they know who's going to go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and I'm going to move it around. Yeah, it's this way, you know, play a little head game with them. I'm only kidding. They know. They know that. The first story. This woman is now a leadership coach. For 33 years, she was in the corporate world. I'm so sorry for you, but somebody has to run the corporations, right? Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, where would we get our toilet paper from? You know, it's all there. But then she learned and she dropped out, and she's here with us tonight. Put your hands together for Amanda Christian.
Hello. I'm just testing the mic. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. The fire engine siren cut through the cold December air like a knife. And I was 4 years old, and it was the only sound in the world I could hear. That siren, that was the signal Uncle David was coming to play Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. So, need to share with you, why was that the only sound I could hear? Well, I lived in a world of cotton-muffled silence. I suffered from severe chronic ear infections and sinus infections since birth. Never stopped. Never got over it in those four years, and actually later. So only the loudest sounds got through. Fire engine, sirens and horns, fireworks, and Uncle David's ho-ho-hos. Other times, it was like I was living in an underwater whisper. But Christmas Eve was different because my Uncle David was the fire chief, and he loved to play Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. And in our little town of Londonderry, it's not so little now, he would go around on Christmas Eve and he would have a little nip at every house. Medicinal purposes only, to help ward off the cold. So I could feel the siren before I could hear it. It was like a deep rumble in my chest, getting louder, getting closer. My cousin Daniel grabbed my hand and we grinned ear to ear, trembling in excitement because Santa was coming. And then I heard the horn. Wah! 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 And the fire engine tore into our yard. The diesel exhaust mixing with the December cold. The engine went silent. The doors slammed shut. Heavy boots beat on the ground. And then the front door burst open. Ho, ho, ho! There was Uncle David in the doorway, this red suited giant. And they had strategically placed my Uncle Danny close by. And I pivoted and started to climb up him like a tree. My little fingers digging into his sweater as I climbed higher and higher and higher until I threw up on him. Uncle David just chuckled and shook his head and said, well, it wouldn't be Christmas Eve without it, would it? Because it was a tradition. My Aunt Jess sighed. She'd seen this story before. So she grabbed my hand and she grabbed my Uncle Danny's hand and we went to the back of the house. Clean shirt for him, a second outfit for me. Then we walked back in to join the festivities in the living room. I didn't realize it then, but now I understand something. I realize something. I realized that the sirens weren't just announcing Uncle David's arrival. They were telling me something more. You see, my family at that time had figured out a way to really love me, despite my not hearing. I was dressed in red when I went out to play in the apple orchards, so they could spot me at the top of the trees. I was allowed to go roam the woods with the two Irish setters, one on each side, even though on occasion they would have to form a search party to find me. Invariably, I came from the opposite direction with the two dogs going, what's the fuss? Right? So, and they also had, and what I realized was that they weren't there for this tradition of my upchucking on my uncle every Christmas Eve. They weren't, we didn't change that tradition. They didn't try to say, oh, don't eat anything or anything like that. They just loved me for who I am. And they were there to catch me when the world got too loud. And even today, in very, very noisy environments, when it just is a unbearable noise in my head, I remember. Not the loudest sounds aren't the scariest. Sometimes they're just telling you you're home.
Tradition in our place on Christmas, it was Uncle Walter was puking, but that's when you know the good time's been had. So we started the kitchen table 5.5 years ago. We've done, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20 of them so far. And I, thought, what's a good name? What are we really doing here? And I think for me it was getting people together around the table and just speaking to one another. And a lot happens around the kitchen table. We all know this, right? So a lot of sharing goes on around the kitchen table. Wow. Yeah, and oh, that's why I have this. Tomorrow is my sister Donna's birthday. She's going to be 71 years old. Could I ask something of you and just say happy birthday?
We could sing it. We sing.
I was hoping so. And leave it to you. Yes, that would be, but fast. Not happy birthday. No, happy birthday.
Donna?
Donna.
All right.
Yeah, she's the eldest of 8 kids. Yeah, I sat, it was an oval table, then my mother, then Donna. Had the youngest and the oldest on either side of my mother. To protect us, of course, because all the others were ne'er-do-wells. All right. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. Oh, that light. Here we go. Okay, ready?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Donna. Happy birthday to you.
I don't know these people. Never met them once. Happy birthday, Donna. Just like that. Thank you very much. All right, so next story. Ready? Yeah, good. She's been up here before. We're lost without this woman. She retired, how long ago was that now? 11 years, pediatrician, has affected many lives, and now we're very happy that she's here affecting ours. Ladies and gentlemen, Valerie Zapolsky.
Okay, so my story is called Crime and Punishment. So I have 4 boys, Ben, Nate, Sam, and Ivan, and a husband, Jeff. Didn't start that way, of course. Started with just Jeff and me. We got married, we were in medical school, then we were working doctors. And so when you're working doctor, you're on call. And so when we were on call, we tried to do it together. And call means that you have to be available to go to the hospital with a moment's notice and then stay there forever until your call is over. So we would try to, when we were first together and married and just the two of us, be on call the same night. So we'd have one night of call where we never saw each other. And then the next 3 nights we were off, and so we would go to work during the day, but then we had dinner and everything else. So 1 in 4 was our call. And then we had baby number 1, Benjamin. And so we can't be on call the same night anymore. We gotta alternate. So Jeff's on call, I'm at home alone. I'm on call, Jeff's at home alone. And then we had 2 nights together, so 50% of the time we can hang out together. And, oh, just a little background. I went to college. I was a social psychology major. So all the psychologists, all the sociologists, read them all. Some were hated, some were good, but pretty much I decided the behaviorists had it right. You, just based on behavior. That's all you want to merely modify. You don't care what's going on in their brain. You just modify the behavior. So you reward good behavior, you punish bad behavior. So back to the story. So we have 1 little baby, and so around 6, 9 months, something like that, you have to really start. They're not just cute things. They start doing things that you want to change. So you start, main go-to discipline methods were consequence or removing the child from the behaviors. Like if he's throwing blocks, you take him away from the blocks and you put him over there. Or just ignoring the behavior, or definitely don't pay attention to the behavior if you don't want it to occur again. So like when a baby does a raspberry, you know, you don't want to do that because then the food is all over the world. So you definitely don't laugh, okay? Because if you laugh, it's all over. So that you've got to ignore that behavior. And then the consequence, the main example is you've got a toddler in the high chair eating dinner, and then he starts throwing food, and that's it. Dinner's over, out, cleaned up, gone. Oh, you wanted to finish that? Too bad. You're going to bed home, hungry. That's the end of it. I never felt bad for them. That's the way it is. It's crime and punishment and consequence and resistance is futile. That's the way it is. So doing that, we had, by the time he was 2 years old, he was mostly voice controlled. And then we had baby number 2, Nathan. So now I got a 2-year-old and a baby. And so it's working well, we're going along. And you have to, but it's sort of like we were 2 parents against the 2 kids. You have to tag team, and so somebody can go do something. You can't always be there, so somebody's making dinner and one person's taking care of it, and some person's cleaning and another person's taking care of them. So you're tag teaming, and we were pretty good on discipline that we agreed on it, and we didn't, even if somebody did something that you didn't agree with, you didn't undo it in front of the kids. You talked about it later, and then we had a new battle plan for the next time. But they, like in war, they say all battle plans are great until you meet the enemy, and then everything goes to pot. So it's the same thing with behavior. You have all these decisions. You're going to do this if they do that. You're going to do this if they get that. And then you know what? They do something else. And you didn't have a plan for that. So now we've been doing just the consequences and everything. And then they're 3 years old and 1 year old. And they bring up the star chart. Okay, everybody's heard of the star chart. You want them to brush their teeth, or clear their plate, or pick up their toys. Make this behavior list, and every time they do it, they get a star in their chart, and it's supposed to encourage good behavior. Well, it doesn't really work. Didn't really work for my kids, because my kids did not care about the stars or stickers. They went, I'd rather do that. That wasn't enough of a disincentive or enough of a reward to encourage the good behavior. So what they argued for when they began to understand what we wanted, they said, nah, it's stickers, you know, I want an M&M, or I want a cookie. And to some extent I said, well, if it works, why not? So we said, okay, if you do a certain amount of stuff, you get a cookie or you get this. And so that, that was a reward, they would do that. But then they got really smart, and they maxed out the reward system. They do the same thing to get the reward over and over and over again, like a trained rat. so it's like they're getting M&Ms, they're getting too many cookies. Like, we need a new plan. This is not working, or it's not good for them anyway. It's working fine, but so then we brought in timeout, and that's like the old Dennis the Menace rocking chair in the corner. You know, when you're bad, you go sit in the corner and think about what you did, or just you can't play. You were having fun with blocks until you flung one at your brother. Now you got to sit in the corner until time's up. And to begin with, you put them in to get them the idea, because they're just 3 years old. They don't really understand anything. So you just put them in the chair and say, you got to stay there till I say you can get out. And then you go, beep, you can get out. And then you set a timer and say, you got to wait for the beep on the timer. And then you just make the timer longer and longer and longer. And the thing is, they need to be in timeout like 20 times, 30 times a day. It's just crazy. And so they take it, they do it, and then before you know it, they're sitting in timeout and things are getting better. You go, this is working, okay. And then they get older. And now they're 4 and 2. And there are 2 timers. And that's like somebody's always beeping because somebody's always in timeout. And they're very busy little boys. And I don't really think they understood that the rules applied every time, for everyone, forever, okay? It doesn't just like, this minute, don't hit your brother. It's like, forever, don't hit your brother. But you think they understand that, and then you see somebody winding up with a plastic baseball bat about to hit their brother, and you go, no! And they drop the bat. So, good. But you could see as he was walking away that maybe next time it would be okay. And it's like, this timeout was not enough of a deterrent, because they enjoyed the crime, it was worth the timeout. So they said, we need something else. So then what did we do next? Went back to the star chart idea thing, but instead of that, we said, okay, if you don't hit your brother all day long, you get to pick the dinner menu. So they had something to look forward to that was sort of, they could pick from macaroni and cheese, hot dogs and beans, get breakfast for dinner. We didn't give them lobster as a choice, but they could pick of those things, and that was something that they could say, okay, that's good, I'll do that, and I'll be good, and you were good today, so you get to pick dinner, or you were, so that worked pretty well. But then they also got smarter, and they would not hit their brother, but they might trip him, or poke him, or hide his toy that he was looking for and not tell him where it was. And they'd say, well, that's not hitting, and I'd say, this judge is not impressed. So that was not working. So then we decided that we had to go for the girl. And so we have 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and we got twin boys. So that's Sam and Ivan. And I really don't remember very much about the first 6 months after they were born. I remember they ate every 2 hours, and it took an hour to feed them. And so there was only barely an hour between you put them down and then they woke up again. And so, even if we couldn't both get up together, we'd be zombies. So we'd tag team. I would get up and do both, and then go, and then an hour later, they would wake up again. So I'd push Jeffrey to go do it. And so, but it was not, even then that wasn't enough. So we invited Jeff's mother, and she moved in. And so then we were 3 separate people doing it. And then you got maybe 4 to 5 very interrupted hours of sleep per night. And I was so excited to go back to work.
Oh, yeah.
Because then I only had to deal with one child at a time. And they all went to daycare or whatever they did. But anyway, so we survived the next 2 years. And then, now we have a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2 2-year-olds. And we're, doing timeout. Only now we have 4 timers. Okay? And somebody's always in timeout. And then sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. And because they're naughty and they're busy, and eventually they get to the point where they're in timeout because they didn't sit in their timeout. So it's like, and they all jump when the timer goes off. They're all jump up, say, "It's my time." And it's like, that's it. I can't take it anymore. We need a new plan. And so I instituted push-ups. And so I figured, the Marines do it. It's healthy. It would expend some of that energy. And so they started at 6, 4, and 2 doing push-ups. They weren't very pretty push-ups to begin with, but they knew what they were because Dad did push-ups, so they knew what a push-up was. But you don't listen to Mom tell you to get down or do 5 push-ups, and it was quick. They get down there to do 5 poor push-ups, but they did them. And I said, okay, you can go back and play. They could do that 50 times a day. But they would choose it. I'd say, well, if you don't want to do push-up, you can sit in timeout. Oh, no, I don't want to sit in timeout. I'll do push-ups. So they do push-ups. And they got really good at push-ups. And what's great about push-ups is they're quick, so it's over, and they wasted some of that energy, like I said, and now it's over, and they can go back and play and do something else. And plus they were redirected. Whatever they were doing that was wrong, they had to stop to do the push-ups and physically do something different, and now they're distracted and off on something else, and so they don't go back to do the bad thing. They weren't thinking about that. They were thinking about push-ups. So it worked really well, and they could do them anywhere. So they're probably, 10, 12 or something, and we're in the grocery store, and somebody's mouthing off. And I don't remember what it was, but I think it was Nathan, but they probably all did it at some point. Yeah. But I looked at him and I said, "Give me 5." And he's in the grocery store, it's in public. And so he's looking around. Anybody gonna see me? And he sort of hesitated. And I looked at him and he still didn't do it. I said, "Give me 10." And he went, and he did 10 really quick in the aisle of the grocery store. And he was an angel after that. And everybody else noticed that. And he's like, "I don't want to do push-ups in public." So they were better. And then the last turning point, or there are many more turning points, but another major turning point was they were still older, early teens, mid-teens, all of them. And they're having a good time. They weren't bad kids. They were just energetic. So they're, Benjamin, he's jumping on the couch, okay? And I look at him, it's like, "No jumping on the couch." And so he gets down. I said, "Good, okay." And then Nathan thinks it's his turn. He's jumping on the couch. And I go, "Nathan, no jumping on the couch. Get down." And he gets down. He's smiling. And Sam and Ivan get up. And they're jumping on the couch. And Jeffrey comes up. And he goes in there. And he starts jumping on the couch. I looked, I was like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "It looked like fun." I looked at him like he was crazy, and I said, "Give me 10. And he looked at me, and he thought about it for a second, but he could just he knew he was going to be a dead man. Because it was like there was a very chaotic future looming if this was allowed to continue. And so he got down and gave me 10. And the kids thought that was the best thing. They all, "Hey, Dad," and they all jumped on his back, and they took turns sitting on his back while he did more push-ups. And it turned into a great time, but that was like a major turning point, because even Dad could be made to do push-ups.
All right, just so you know, the statute of limitations has passed, all right? No falling die fists, none of that. And just so you know, this is a different generation. I'm looking at you because you're like, oh my God, what is going on here? Just different time. And boy, what great boys you do have. Yes, you do. Yeah. And that includes Jeffrey too. I don't know if he realized, but he was conditioned. You're conditioned, Jeff. Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, don't be surprised if you get a phone call from ICE asking you to come work down at Alligator Alley. Or Alligator Alcatraz, yeah. Woohoo! Okay, ready for another one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This next storyteller, just been getting to know you, and it's been wonderful. Sydney has been in the pit, singing at shows for some time. She just recently joined us at the Mountain Home Companion, where she recited some of her poetry, which was fabulous. She's had, I think, 8 books published. Yeah, and she taught down at the University of Florida for 27 years, but she's here with us tonight. Put your hands together, please, for Sydney Wade.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. So, it's 1977. I'm 26 years old. I'm in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle on a 40-foot sloop with my family, my husband, my brother, my dad, 2 hired hands, a cook, a first mate, and my new friend, Nancy. This is the maiden voyage of the Beyond, which is what the boat was named. The boat itself was far more seasoned than my dad. This was my dad's first transatlantic trip. We were going from the East River in New York City to Bermuda. The boat itself had circumnavigated the globe twice. It was kind of a famous boat, because not many boats can do this. I had sailed a lot in my youth. I had absolute faith in this boat. My dad was an absolute safety nut. We all had 17 drogues and whistles and 5 different life vests, and the boat was just crammed with all this stuff. Dad had checked the weather reports, which were not quite as good in those days as they are now. And it was clear sailing. It was going to be a beautiful 7-day sail from New York to Bermuda. So we go out, we have 2 good days, 3, you are on shift, you're on watch every 4 hours or so, for 2 hours. And everything's going smoothly. And then all of a sudden, the weather, the wind starts to rise. And as I said, we're in the Bermuda Triangle. And the waves start to get bigger. And they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And over the weather report, they say, oh, well, here's a surprise tropical cyclone that's just arisen. And okay, it's going to get much worse. And it does get much worse. The waves get to be 40 feet high. When you're sailing in this kind of condition, you have to keep your boat parallel to the wave. You just ride up the wave, and then it goes below you. And then you go down, and you ride up the next wave. If you head into it, you can get killed. You can pitch pole, and that's the end. So that was our job on watch. The wind is howling. It's I don't know, 70 miles an hour. You have to take down all your sails. You're motoring to keep some headway so you can manage the trajectory of the boat. While you're on watch, you can guarantee every 4 or 5 minutes a wave is going to wash over your head. Of course, you have your wellies on, your yellow coat and pants, but the water gets everywhere. It's Gulf Stream, so it's not cold, but the inevitability of every 4 minutes, this water going over your head, it drove me crazy. I was not afraid for my life, but this thing really got to me. It was terrible. And so then you go down into the gangplank and, into the gangway, which is absolutely, totally messed up because all the stuffed cabins, all the safety equipment has gotten onto the floor. But everybody's too tired to pick it up. The cook has been sick for a day or two, so we didn't have anything to eat. Anyway, things were not fun. Dad is gonna, and then all of a sudden, this terrible sound would happen irregularly. Every now and then there'd be a boom, and the boat would shake. And we didn't know why. It wasn't a whale hitting us. There were no logs out there. Couldn't figure it out. It was irregular. But it kept happening. And so the only thing that the adults in the room could think of is the keel might be falling off. And you know, if you know sailboats, the keel is the only thing that keeps you upright. This is bad. So Dad gets on the radio and calls the Coast Guard. And they say, well, we're going to send a Coast Guard cutter down to see about this. The Coast Guard cutter was in Nantucket, and it would take 24 hours for the boat to get to us. The law of the sea says that when a vessel is in trouble, the nearest vessel has to come to its aid, which means circling the afflicted boat until something is resolved, or sending out help if the boat capsizes or whatever. So the first unfortunate boat to cross our path was a Danish tanker, an oil tanker. And there we go, thank you. It circled us for 24 hours. It must have cost this company $100,000, but they had to do it. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard cutter is coming down to get us. The storm itself has abated by this time. However, the waves are still 40 feet. The agreement is the Coast Guard cutter would send their chief engineer onto the boat to see if he thought, indeed, the keel was going to fall off. If he thought it was going to fall off, we would be evacuated from the boat, and the boat would be towed to somewhere. If he didn't think that was the case, we would, sail on to Bermuda once we could. So they send a Zodiac. You know what a Zodiac is? A little rubber dinghy from their boat to ours. And the chief engineer walks around and he thinks, I can't think of any other reason why this might be happening. It could be the keel falling off. So they evacuate us. It's not a problem getting off our boat onto the Zodiac because there's about this much freeboard. The Zodiac is down here, our deck is up here. You can jump into the Zodiac, but getting onto the cutter is an entirely different proposition because it's got about 15 feet of freeboard. And the waves are still 40 feet high, and so the cutter is doing this the whole time. And so you have to position the Zodiac right here, stand on the edge of the Zodiac, while they send a little rope ladder over the side. And at one point, the rope ladder is here, and then the boat rolls, and it's up here. And so you had to time your leap from the Zodiac onto the boat. We all made it. We get, I'm sorry. There's one more picture that you should see of the tired crew. Yes. This is what you did after your watch. You're just filthy, there's salt water everywhere. Okay, so we all get off the boat. Now, this was a giant storm. Every port on the eastern seaboard was covered by this storm. So they had to tow us to Bermuda. So the crew aboard the ship were really happy about this because they had just come out of Nantucket, which was cold and rainy, and they're going to this tropical paradise. So we all get off the boat. We're starving. We hadn't eaten any. Oh, another thing that had happened was our water supply had been compromised every time we drank water, we tasted kerosene. And we think, we can't drink this water. Well, my dad's favorite drink was port. We had tons of port aboard. So basically what we survived on for 36 hours is peanuts, port, and Dramamine. So by the time we get to this cutter, we're starving to death. We're filthy. And they usher us into the officers' wardroom, which is where the officers have their dinners. And these handsome cadets come bringing in food with their gloved hands. They bring in a tureen of turkey noodle soup, and we're just dying to eat it. And so they set it on the table. Now, do you know what a gimbaled table is? It's when they have them on boats, so that the table itself stays level no matter what the boat does underneath it. And so this table was not gimbaled, which is very strange. And they served us the soup in these elegant, shallow bowls. And so when the boat would go like this, as it did, the soup would dribble out this side, and then the boat would go like this, and the soup would dribble out that side. And so meanwhile, you can change the picture now. We're just starving, and we're trying to get the food into it. And finally, we picked up the bowls and tried to do it ourselves. There's one more terrible eating picture here that you can switch to. I think. There, that's my problem. So we get cleaned up, and they tow us to Bermuda. Now, if the keel had been compromised, the boat would have fallen apart under that kind of a pressure, but it didn't. We get to Bermuda, the boat gets into dry dock, we look at the keel, absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with it. So, meanwhile, we all fly home, we leave the boat in Bermuda, and years later, Nancy meets a lovely young man who works for the landing boat building school down in Kennebunkport. So he knows all about building boats. And he figured out what the problem was. What it was our water supply was held in square containers that ran, or tubes, that ran from the bow to the back. Remember, this is an old boat. It had circumnavigated the globe twice, so it had undergone a lot of punishment. Jamie guessed that the baffles in these tubes had eroded, and that every now and then the weight of the water, that given just the right angle, would go rushing forward and slam into the bow and shake the whole boat, which is actually what happened. They later inspected the baffles, and they were bad. But the end of the story is that we all flew home, we were all safe and happy, and several months later, my dad got back on the boat and sailed it off to the Caribbean, which is where he had intended to go all along.
We're clean and happy.
Look at the legs on this guy, huh? Oh, yeah! Nobody's lonely on the open ocean. No, sir. Is that your dad?
That's my dad.
Ah, Daddy. Was he the captain?
He was.
He was. Yeah, what was the name of the boat again?
The Beyond.
The Beyond. So, I guess if you had two other boats, it could have been the Bed, the Bath, and the Beyond.
Oh, geez.
What? How much did you pay? I don't think so. So, when we have these performances, I will throw out occasionally a theme. When they ask, I don't know what story I should tell, and so just get their minds going. Yeah, this will be the word, and I did. And at the end, I'm going to ask you, what do you think the theme was? Because right now, if you start thinking, it's like, huh? I don't know. Yeah. Well, this next one may help. And what a story it is. Looking forward to it. I spent a lot of time with this woman these past few months. For the second time, I'm her husband, in the mousetrap, I was Amos to her Roxy Hart. And boy, was I a sorry case and a half, but a happy sorry case. Yeah. She is a cowgirl, and on a steel horse she rides. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, none other than Ann Crump.
Thank you, Tim. I got married at 35 years old, and I wanted to be a mom. A friend of mine got married a week before I did, and she wanted to be a mom too. So she was a school teacher, and we just talked about it, and she said, if only I could get pregnant, have my child, and have the complete summer off with my baby. Well, wouldn't you know, her due date was the last week of school.
Wow.
So, being 35 years old, I was of advanced maternal age. And, you know, that means more testing, more complications potentially, all of that nonsense. So, she, you know, had a very good pregnancy, had her baby, everything went well. I got pregnant, and I didn't have an OBGYN, so I found this wonderful doctor, Dr. Lemonier, and I went and, you know, you're pregnant. Yay! So everything was, you know, in plan, in what we wanted. But something wasn't right. So they did blood tests every other day, and still something wasn't right. And you heard a heartbeat, but something wasn't right. We didn't know what it was, but we knew it wasn't right. So I was a pharmaceutical rep at the time, and I was going into a meeting, a breakfast meeting with 100 doctors. It was a large meeting, and I got a phone call from the doctor that morning. Not the doctor's office, the doctor. Doctors don't normally call patients. So Dr. Lemonier said, Ann, I need you to come in today. We need to get some preliminary testing for surgery tomorrow. I'd like you to go to the hospital for surgery. So I said, okay, I'm busy this morning, but I'll be there afterward. She said, anytime you come is fine. And then I had what I call balloon head, is when you feel like your head isn't attached to your body, because I couldn't think about anything else. I had this successful breakfast meeting, and I went to the doctor, and she said, I believe you have an ectopic pregnancy. If you are unfamiliar with what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's fatal to both the baby and the mother if untreated. The fetus implants in the fallopian tube rather than in your uterus, which is impossible to go on. So of course it needs to be surgically taken care of. So the next morning, I went to surgery, and I had surgery. Time went by for me to emotionally and physically heal, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I want to be a mom. So I got pregnant again, and I was like, this is, you know, great. I'm going to have a baby. Something wasn't right. Went to Dr. Lemonier and had tests, heard another heartbeat. But again, something, unfortunately, wasn't right. And I'm having a miscarriage. So again, time has to pass as you emotionally and physically heal. But did I give up? No. I got pregnant again. And this pregnancy stayed, but I was afraid the whole time. When was that shoe gonna drop? I enjoyed being pregnant. I loved it. I was healthy. But there was always that shadow of doubt. What is gonna happen? Well, at about 36 weeks, I was having contractions, so I called Dr. Lemonnier. I'd been seeing her throughout the whole pregnancy, being of advanced maternal age. And she said, come on in. So she hooked me up, and they were monitoring the heartbeat and my heartbeat and movement and all of the things that they do, the contractions, and I was there for hours that morning, and the nurses would come in and check things, and then they'd leave, and then the doctor would say, how are you doing? And I'm fine, I'm just lying here. And, you know, they'd constantly come in, and then she said, okay, tomorrow morning you are going to the hospital to have a non-stress test. They have better equipment there, so I want you to head over there tomorrow morning. I said, okay. So they don't really tell me anything but that I need more monitoring. So, because I hadn't eaten breakfast that morning and I was beyond starving, I said, okay. I made myself the biggest breakfast I could find, being, 8 months pregnant. Went to the hospital with nothing but a grocery list, because I figured I'd go there, I'd get the groceries, I've got another month before this baby's born. So anyway, I go, and it's a non-stress test, and they put all of the monitors on you and whatnot. So my husband is standing, looking at what's going on the monitor, and the nurses can see what, they can monitor you from the nurse's station. And he said, there's gonna be some activity here in a moment. And I'm like, brother. So nurses come running in, physically running in, and they lie me down and they put me to the side and they make sure everything's okay. And they said, we're calling the on-call doctor. I said, okay, because Dr. Lemonnier wasn't available. He comes in and starts asking me questions. He said, you're gonna have your baby right now. So within a minute, I had intake asking me all kinds of questions. I had a nurse putting an IV in and drawing blood. I had a catheter being put in. I had my husband being dressed in a Tyvek suit. I was being peppered with questions from this doctor who didn't know me. Is the head down? Did you have these tests? What were the results? And I had an epidural being put in, all at the same time. And at that point I said, just take it. Take my baby. Get it out. So they whisked me in for emergency C-section surgery that morning. With every contraction, his umbilical cord was being compressed, and it was only this long. They had to cut it before he was even out of me. So his heartbeat was being reduced to about 40 to 60 beats a minute with every contraction. They were very afraid of lack of oxygen and brain damage. So they whisked him away, and there I was. All of a sudden, I'm a mom. Not as I expected. I did it all again. So I have my son, who's 19 right now. He's right there. And I have a daughter who's 16. So something is right. And I want to say, I do this. Greet everyone with a smile, because you have no idea what people have gone through in their life. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Adam, how many times have we heard this story?
How many times have you heard this story?
Have you?
Twice.
Twice, really?
Tonight
Wow.
and the other night.
Wow. Good for you. Good for you. Did you see Diva? No, no. Well, if you want to see like a reenactment of your birth, she did a skit on Alien, and it came out, and it was like really.
I
It was.
saw that puppet. That was an impressive puppet.
It was. No match for you. You're definitely more handsome than that puppet was. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. We have 2 more stories. You ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Yes. So am I. Yeah, she's gone for the record of how many times telling a story at the kitchen table, and I'm really delighted to have her back again. This woman, she resides in Massachusetts, but she lives in Maine. She's an auntie to many and a grandma to 2. Put your hands together for Marie Sutherland.
My father was Thomas Barca. Barca, B-A-R-C-A, the Italian way, not Barker with a Boston accent that comes out like Barca. But he was the smartest, biggest-hearted, kindest man I've ever known. He was born, well, people called him Tom, people called him Timmy. We, his children, called him Barca, which seems odd to call your father by his last name, but for some reason it worked for us and all of his grandchildren, so that's what we did. He was born the 4th child out of 10 to an Italian Catholic family and raised in Belmont, Massachusetts. When he was 4 years old, his father, my nonno, had a produce wagon that was horse-drawn, and they would go through the neighborhoods in Belmont. And my nonno would be yelling, "The fruit, the veg, the produce, the fruit, the veg, the produce," and off they'd go down the road. People would come to the wagon and he'd stop it and there'd be a crowd and then they'd go away. But more importantly, people would call from porches and windows on 2nd and 3rd floors. And they'd call down their order. My nonno would package it up. My father would run it up to them at 4 years old and run it back down. So at 4 years old, he was already learning about customer service.
Wow.
So he was a very, very smart man. However, he only got to go to the 7th grade. Slide, Jeff. So he only got to go to the 7th grade. Handsome man. So he had to go to work because it was the mid-1920s and he had to help support the family. So he ended up working for the First National Stores, which was the IGAs of the Boston area at the time. And where did he end up? The produce department. When he was in his 30s, like most men at that time, he went into the Army to go serve in World War II. When he came back, he went right back to Belmont, Massachusetts, and right back to the First National. But now he was the produce manager. So when everybody wanted to go out and dance and carry on a Friday or Saturday night in the Boston area, you went to the State Ballroom. So one night, my father would go on the weekends, and this one night, there were 2 women being harassed by a drunk. So my father went over, ended that situation, ended up marrying one of those 2 women, my mother. So they dated for a while. Next slide. They dated for a while. Still very dapper, my father was, and my mother too, but my father really. And then they married, had their first daughter. So she was born in July. The following July, they were expecting another child. And so my father is in the waiting room, waiting for the baby to be born, because men were not in with you when you were having babies back then. So he's walking back and forth, and they're all smoking and carrying on. And the nurse comes in, and she says, "Congratulations, Mr. Barker. You have 2 beautiful baby girls." And my father said, "Yeah, I know, one's gonna be a year and 9 days. And the nurse says, "Congratulations, Mr. Barker. You have 3 beautiful baby girls." And my father said, "What am I gonna do with that?" So we used to see these pictures when we'd go through our photo albums at home, and my father sitting with a pile of diapers he was folding at night after work. And 6 years after the twins were born, I came along. And then shortly, well, a little more than a year later, my sister Rita came along. So now my father has 5 baby girls. Next slide. And so we would, we would take pictures often if we weren't stacked up like that. We would be in a line, and he would always call it the lineup. So 5 baby girls. And the year I was born, he decides he's going to buy his uncle's little store, which was akin to a Lakeside or a OG. So my father decides he's going to buy this store, and he's got 5 girls. The store was the typical spa of the day. It had opened in 1910 as the Watertown Fruit Market. Did you see the theme with my father here? Always fruit and vegetables. So it was Watertown Fruit Market, and then his uncle, John, turned it into Barker's Spa, and SPA, Spa, to the Italians back then meant like a variety store. It was a little convenience store, but with lots of variety. Not like you go to a spa now. So my dad bought the store, and it had the typical counter with the 5 little spinning stools. We had coffee and donuts and penny candy and ice cream sodas and milkshakes and fraps and cold sandwiches. So you know, that's what my dad did. He owned this little store that opened every day at 6:30 in the morning, Monday through Saturday, and closed at 10:30 at night.
Whoa.
But on Sundays, he didn't open till 7:30.
Oh,
And till 10:30 at night. And he was there almost every hour the store was open. He came home for 1 meal a week, and that was Sunday dinner at 1 o'clock. He would come home, and we would sit as a family. The only meal I ever sat with my dad to eat was Sunday dinner. So when I was 6 years old, I get a birthday card from my father. And it wasn't the typical love ma and dad, like every birthday card I had gotten from then until my mom passed away. It was from my father. And I open it up, I'm all excited, and it says, "Happy birthday, daughter, number 4. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, after school till 5:30, open Sunday mornings till 1. I did get an hour off to go to church and then back. But that was pretty much my schedule until I walked out of there to go to college. Other hours, I was 6 then, but as you got older, there were more hours added to that. But always, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sundays were my days. So, as I said before, my father was a very kind, funny man. And there were tons of people that came in and out of the store. There were no Dunkin' Donuts then, so people came there to get their coffee and their sandwich for lunch or whatever it was they wanted. And a lot of the kids that grew up in the store would start out buying penny candy, and then they'd get old enough so they could buy a soda. Then they'd get old enough so they could sit up at the counter and drink milkshakes and fraps with their friends, or sometimes a girl even. But a lot of those people who came into the store ended up staying in town and becoming townies. They were townies. They worked for the fire department, the police department, public works, the town office, etc. So my father had grown these children up. And there was this one woman who used to come into the store quite often. She had a bunch of kids, but no one ever saw her husband, so we're pretty sure she was widowed, but it was never discussed. And my father called her kids the Tribe. And when she'd come in, she'd have 1 or 5 of them with her at all times. So there was this one day she came in by herself, and she never bought anything frivolous. She would buy the milk, the bread, a can of beans, a thing of corn, whatever it was, but never anything frivolous, not even a newspaper. I mean, when I say bare bones. So this one day she comes in, and she's walking back and forth in the store, and she looks into the ice cream case, and she walks away, and then she walks back, and she looks into the ice cream case, and my father says, "Hey," I was about 9 at this point in time, and my father said, "Hey, what's going on?" And she said, "It's one of the kids' birthdays, and I made a cake, but I thought I might be able to get some ice cream, but I can't afford it." So my father opens up the ice cream case and takes out that brick of ice cream that's how the half-gallons of ice cream used to come. He takes out the Neapolitan, and it's the vanilla strawberry chocolate, snaps the bag, puts the ice cream in the bag, and hands it to her. "Mr. Barker, I can't afford this." And he says, "It's okay. It's on me. You go home, you have a little birthday celebration with your family."
Nice.
All these years later, I still cannot recall that story and that moment in my life without getting choked up as I watched her leave the store in tears. So, in the 80s, my father has a slight heart attack. It isn't a lot. And he recovers and he goes right back to the store. And the guys, all my life when I was growing up, my father's peers would say, "Tom, you get those 5 girls. You poor bastard. What are you gonna do with that?" And my father, I can remember him, I was probably 13 now. I can remember him saying to one of the guys, "When my girls will not be drafted, and my girls will not go to Vietnam, but your sons may. And then your sons may meet someone and marry, and they'll leave you. My girls will still be here for me." So I can remember that, him saying that whenever anyone would give him a hard time about not having a boy to carry on the name, the Barker name. So I would threaten him that I would be more than happy to have a child out of wedlock and call it Barker. That didn't fly. He didn't like that idea at all. So after a while, in 1991, it was March of 1991, I was home with my father, and he came walking across the living room floor and fell to the ground. Sudden death heart attack. I called 911. A lot of those kids that bought penny candy, those firefighters, those police officers came to his aid, and they worked on him, and they worked on him, and they worked on him, and they took him to the hospital in the ambulance, and they never stopped working on him because I was right behind the ambulance and I could see them. My father survived because of those guys that had bought penny candy. He was in for a long rehabilitation. He was in the hospital for a while, and then after the hospital, he ended up in rehab. Finally, in May of '91, he comes home. And we're all really happy he's home. And Memorial Day was a big time. My father always sold the flowers in front of the store, but for the Memorial Day parade to go by, he would shut the door and no one could go into the store while he watched that parade. So I said to him, come on, Dad, we're gonna go down the corner and watch the parade. So I have to put him in a wheelchair because he would have never made it to the corner. I put him in a wheelchair and I take him down. And as the parade is going by, you know, the baton twirlers and all that, you know, the school band, the whole parade thing in a small town. The firefighters and the police is starting to come, and my father says, stand me up. I'm like, Dad, he said, stand me up. So I stand him up and I'm supporting him. And as that part of the parade goes by, my father is just standing there, clapping. He wouldn't stop clapping. And the guys are like, Mr. Parker, oh my goodness, Tom, you went here. So they were all happy to see him because no one had seen him since his heart attack. So time goes on. Now it's August of '91, and my father needs 24-hour care. So I make the decision to give up my high-tech job and take care of him full-time with my sister's help. So exactly as he had predicted, we were spending nights, we had a schedule, who's cooking, who's with him, who's sleeping over, all of that. And then so my father's words came true, that his girls never did leave him. And 3 of us had married and had families, but still that schedule was what kept him going for that 24-hour care. So in November of 1991, I was his advocate, so I would be at the hospital anytime he was hospitalized. I'd be at the hospital with him from 9 o'clock in the morning till they threw me out at 8 or 9 at night. And I go into the hospital one day, the rehab hospital, and he's lost his sense of humor. And I think, oh, this does not bode well. Because my father's sense of humor was fabulous. So he ended up dying 2 days after that particular moment. And I still know in my heart that as he learned customer service at 4 years old with his father on the produce wagon, I learned customer service starting at 6 years old, being with him at the store. And every job I've ever had since then, volunteer or paid, has always been customer service in some way, shape, or form. When I was, I worked with my dad, then I was a candy striper, then I went into daycare for a minute, and then high tech for a long time. But every job, even in high tech, I ran help desks or telecommunications groups. I always was in a group that served other people. And I know that his love of family, his customer service skills, his sense of humor, and his heart is partially how my character was built. But not partially, completely built. But the most important thing I learned being with my dad was the love of family. Next slide. The love of family. So here's the lineup at my wedding. The only wedding pictures I could show because it was mine and they can't say anything. And then the last slide, please. And this is with all of his grandchildren and the 5 of us and our spouses. But the love of family was key in my life. But most importantly, what my father left me with is whenever humanly possible in your life, you take out a brick of Neapolitan ice cream and you hand it to someone who needs it at that moment.
stories, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a great audience. I really appreciate you being here. No. That looks like every American family I've ever seen.
Every Italian American.
Well, yeah. Very, very large. You know, when I first started the kitchen table, one of my ideas was that it would be multimedia. You know, not just like the moth, any mothers out there, you know, where you stand, you tell the story, but you know, you have the pictures being shown here or a movie. People have come up, they played musical instruments. There's a lot of different ways that people have told their stories. I say that because of this next storyteller. This fella, I was very fortunate to meet him some years ago, and I talked him into doing The Odd Couple with us 2 years ago, and he was a lot of fun. So much fun that I think we're actually friends. I didn't ask, hey, will you be my friend, David? I know. God, I hope he doesn't say no. But you know, I'll survive. And now here he is this summer. He also is in Chicago. He also is in the Mousetrap, and now here he is doing the kitchen table as well. He's the director up at the Wilhelm Reich Museum, and he's in the Mousetrap with his son, Raoul, who's here for us tonight. And I just want you to greet him with a round of applause, Mr. David Silver.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's me?
Yeah, you.
Okay, let's do this and then we can all go home. I'm a first-generation American. My parents came to this country. My parents are from Poland. We're from Poland, and they emigrated to this country in 1949. In 1950, my sister was born. 5.5 years later, my brother was born. And 5.5 years later, I was born. So you're sensing a pattern here, right? When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my mother told me a story. And she said she had another pregnancy in between my brother and my sister. She was pregnant with twins. And she went to the hospital and she delivered 2 live boys, but they didn't survive. And I was surprised, and I asked, did they have names? What were their names? And she said, well, it all happened so fast. Everyone was just concerned about their condition. And so in the hospital, they just called them the Silver Babies, because that was our name. And I said, well, is there a grave? Is there a stone or something? She said, no, they didn't really do that. I don't know. They didn't do that. So in my kid's imagination, at that time, I pictured a little graveyard next to a hospital in Albany, New York, with little stones where the babies that didn't make it were buried, and one of them said Silver Babies on it. And that was just this image I had. Nearly 20 years later, and also, you know, these stories were told, people, my parents and a lot of their friends, they've been through a lot of stuff. But when they told stories, it was usually without emotion, because it was stuff that happened a long time ago. Nearly 20 years later, I'm in my late 20s, I'm at my parents' for dinner, and this story comes up, and I ask my mother about it. And the emotional impact of it just starts to hit me. I mean, this is really something. I mean, here are these people who suffered a lot, and by some miracle, after World War II, they were alive. And by another miracle, they were in America, and they had modern medical care. And by another miracle, my mother was pregnant with twin boys, and yet it was a tragedy. How do you move on from that? So it just started to mean something to me, because this wasn't about relatives who perished in prior decades, thousands of miles away. This was my immediate family. These were brothers, and they were just, you know. So the story stuck with me, and I felt I needed to do something to process it. I went home that night, and I started to write some stuff. See, I was, at that time, I wrote music software for a living, and I had instruments, and I had recording equipment, and I had computers, and I used to compose a little and play keyboards, but I wasn't a songwriter. I didn't think of myself as a songwriter or a singer or anything like that. But I started writing some lyrics. I just was trying to express how I felt about this. And then I started to set them to music, and then I started recording, and suddenly I guess I was some kind of a songwriter. And within the next few weeks, I had a song about the Silver Babies called Silver Babies. So, what I'd like to do right now is play you that song so that as I tell you this story now, I will be helped by the story I told in music to myself, really, 36, 7 years ago. And also, I want to mention, a few friends heard this over the years, but it was just sort of in the vault. And last year, I got out the master tapes and I digitized them and I remastered it and remixed it, and which is serendipitous, so that it's can be here with us today. And in the last few days, in preparation for this, because this all happened very quickly, I set the song, turned the song into a video, and I added text and imagery to kind of round out the story. Okay, so this will take about 6 minutes, and then I do have, go back to the mic, and I do have a kind of an epilogue that I'd like to say afterward, please. self-indulgent that I made you wait for this.
That's all right.
That's Raoul.
That's Raoul. That's the Rose who was 27 ounces when she was born in 1950.
Wow. Ah, ah. Wow, look at that hair.
Okay, it's a. Now, there is a bit of an epilogue. In fact, this part of this story, it just happened yesterday. So silver babies for me became more than just the silver babies. It became a kind of a metaphor for the unlikely fact of the continued existence of my family as a going concern on planet Earth. And I considered myself and my siblings to also be silver babies. And at the core of this, obviously, was my father, who was born in 1910. He was a carpenter, old world carpenter, but he also was cultured. He played the violin, and he wrote poetry in Yiddish. And nothing made him happier than to have, than to be able to read one of his poems to a gathering of people from his community. And I have one of his poems. And it's probably not one he would have read because it was a very personal one to him. And when I looked at this recently, I thought, similar to the way I needed to write Silver Babies to process some tragedy that I was feeling, I think, well, it's obvious. That's what motivated him in writing this poem, and it will be somewhat self-explanatory. He was married before the war, shortly before the Germans invaded Poland. And so anyway, I want to read this. It's an English translation, a literal translation, so it doesn't have poetic style, not much. And it's not very long, and it's called Memorial. And I want to read that as a memorial to him, and it's called Memorial by Victor Silver. Oh, I see you, my dear. You are my ideal. Only tears are choking. Such is my fate. For surely you remain cherished forever. In the most remote, you are still there. And there on the mountain stones, I see your ghost. Oh, my heart is crying, and I have no comfort. 2 brothers and 2 sisters with you together, searching for protection as so from their mother, with you together led into the grave. Oh, how ashamed the world remained. The baby remained happy till the very end. You wanted so bad to protect it from murder. You hugged it tightly and sang it a song, and the murderer shoots and the blood boils. It boils and calls and screams for revenge. My heart is aching, my blood drips, and there on the mountain stones I see your ghost. Oh, my heart is crying, and I have no comfort. And then there's an inscription, composed from memory the same day I learned that my wife, child, and her brothers and sisters were all killed in a communal grave on the Jewish cemetery in Krasnik near Lublin in Poland, being that time myself imprisoned in concentration camp Budzin, Poland. This happened in 1942. And so just as the final epilogue to this, yesterday I went on ChatGPT. I said, you know anything about Jews being killed in the Jewish cemetery in Krasnik in 1942? And it said, gave a bunch of information about things happening in Krasnik. There were 6,300 Jews due to an influx of refugees, and 4,000 of them were deported to death camps. But notably, in November 1942, around 200 Jews were executed in the Jewish cemetery on Shuska Street, now Dolna Street in Krasnik. And so, you know, we hear about the magnitude of death all over the world, really, during World War II. But every one of those people family. And now I know that of these 200, this tiny little group of 200 that were murdered and dropped into a communal grave at this cemetery in November 1942, we know who 6 of them were. My father's wife, Mincha Sonnenblit, was her maiden name. Her 2 brothers, I know their names, Abram and Benjamin. Her 2 sisters, I don't know their names. And her child, it's like a toddler, Nuchem Zilberknopf, who would now be 84 years old. And that's my brother. And so he's also the last silver puppy. Thank you.
David Silver. This is why we tell stories, so people know who we are, why we were here, and what happened while we were here. And if any of you sitting out there say to yourself, yeah, I do, I want to share a story, contact me. Let me know. I'd love to sit down with you and being able to do so with these folks right here, workshopping with them and then opening up. It's been a real blast. I hope that you've enjoyed these stories, and I hope you had a good time tonight. And do me a favor, one more time, give a round of applause to Amanda Christian, Val Sapolsky, Sydney Wade, and our Trump, Maureen Sutherland, David Silver, and Jeff Sapolsky up there in the tech booth. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for coming, folks. Have a good night. Enjoy your rest of the Oh, you want to take a guess at the theme?
Whoever's coming to America.
It was fertilizer. Fertilizer. You know, when you think about where things come from, for Amanda, it was the love of her family and understanding who she was that her love for them grew, and the love that she's been able to share with other people. Sydney, you know, that circumstance that she was in, you know, because of the fertilization from that ordeal, her lifelong friendship with her friend Nancy. And just sheer determination, you know, yeah, you could be fertile, but I'll tell you, the way that the women are treated in the healthcare system, it's pretty horrendous. And you know, not taking anything away from doctors, not taking anything away from hospitals, but then her determination brought into the world Adam and Lila, and then Marie. You know, it's all about it. You know, that's right. They used to have families with 10 kids. It was like a competition back in the day. Yeah, and David, there it is. Make no mistake about it. You know, you keep going. You keep going. And the fertilization, I hope that you all get to experience the inspiration and love and the fertility of that. Yeah. Thank you.